This morning, as I was taking my very early walk, I encountered a minyan. Surprise, it's illegal in this country at this point. And not only that, but I saw essentially the leader of the community, the halachic authority, the legal authority for the community was there supervising it. And I was wondering what possibly could motivate such a thing. Now, I do think that for people who are religious, especially in this kind of community, there's a sense that the only thing that they can do is pray and learn. And if they're not doing that, the world will come to an end. And maybe so. Maybe if Jews stop learning, the world will come to an end. But you know what? You can still learn in your house. But just like learning, there's a performative aspect. There can be. I'm sure we've all felt it, seen it, maybe done it ourselves. There's a performative aspect to praying in public, to this idea that we are now taking on for the entire community the responsibility for prayer. No one else can pray, and we are actually doing it. We're making, in fact, it's a sacrifice on our part. We are sacrificing ourselves, not physically, of course, but we're up early in the morning, we're out together, we're even defying the law, although of course this legal authority is there. We're defying the law on the behalf of the rest of Israel. Pesach is a time to actually think about that issue, the question of the responsibility of one person to another. At the beginning of the Seder, we say every year, Halach Maniyah, this is the bread of affliction. And while calling attention to the bread of affliction, the bread of pain, the matzot, we call out to anyone who can hear that if you're in need, come and eat with us. If you haven't performed the Paschal sacrifice, as it were, come and perform it with us. Now, every year that rings strangely, actually, because you know you're sitting at your table, and everybody who you know already is sitting at somebody else's table and has been invited, if not for days, then for weeks. So it's a kind of performative, or kind of performance, this invitation, which never can be fulfilled or met. Nobody can accept. And all the more so this year with the coronavirus. For the first time in decades and decades, my dad is going to be alone in an apartment in Florida, keeping Pesach by himself. There are many, many people I know in the neighborhood, people who come to us for Shabbos, for a meal, who now are on their own. So there are people in need, and we want to invite them, and we can't. Even 800 years ago, one of the commentaries points out that this invitation is not a performance for other people. It's actually a performance for ourselves, that we remember on Pesach, on El Seder, when we're sitting with our families, and we're sitting with abundance, and we're sitting with relatives and friends, that there are people who are also alone. And part of that, and that is one of the things that comes out of Pesach, and one of the things that comes out of the birth of the Jewish people, is to remember the stranger, for you were once strangers in Egypt. You were once alone. You were once the outsider. You were once the person who was in exile. You were once the person who was in need. And that's what Pesach is. We can't, as I remind my children and my students, we are living through a world historical crisis at the moment. That is not being overdramatic. We don't know what we're living through, and we can't really face it because we're still in the middle of it, and because in a way we don't want to acknowledge the extent of it. But we have to even start thinking about how are we going to go on from here? What happens next? What happens when, God willing, we survive this? And I think part of that is being present in any way that we can in our communities. We can't rely on the state to do this. In our families, in our communities, in our work, we have to make ourselves present to people who are lonely. Make ourselves present to people who are in pain. Make ourselves present to others. So religiosity is not performance. And we do have a performance, the Pesach Seder, which is a kind of performance. And part of that performance is reminding ourselves and everybody sitting at our table that there are also people in need.